Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm DJ Sixsmith. You're watching Sit Down. Brand new book from Gaff, The Lost Memoir, Lou Gehrig. How are you, sir? What's going on?
We're surviving the pandemic crisis and doing quite well. So it's an interesting experience to have a brand new book come out in the middle of this interesting time we live in, but we're doing well.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And it was really great to go back in time and, think about one of the best baseball players ever in Lou Gehrig, and also him being captured at this time in his life where he was just coming to Major League Baseball. He's fascinated by Babe Ruth. Like, I know you were doing some research into another book, but what was most interesting when you first read all this stuff in the old newspaper clippings from the 20s?
I think the most interesting thing was the fact that he wrote it in the middle of probably the best baseball year ever. Mm-hmm. He didn't write it as an old man. He was immersed right in the middle of everything. He was actually writing the columns while the season was progressing.
Yeah, he was so impressionable. That's the thing that really jumped out to me. Like when he first saw Babe Ruth play, when he's at Columbia, when he first gets into the majors. When you think about that point in his life and that relationship between him and the Babe, what are some things you want people to know about that?
I think the important thing is that Lou Gehrig admired the Babe for a long time. Later in life, they had a falling out, but for many years, he just idolized the Babe. And the funny thing was people tried to make him into the Babe, and there was absolutely no way that was ever going to happen. He was a different hitter. He was a different individual. He never, when he started, he never smoked, drank, or swore. Later in his career, after he was married and been with his teammates for a while, he did all three. He loved to have, later in life, he loved to have a beer and a cigarette after a game just to relax and calm down after a victory or defeat, no matter what it was.
You mentioned the falling out between Babe and Lou, but at least in the early stages, like things were in a pretty good spot. And I was really surprised at just how willing the Babe was in terms of helping Lou. Like, what jumped out to you when you were deconstructing that relationship and what Lou was saying about just little conversations that they were having?
Yeah, Babe could have been looking at it from a different point of view, because Babe was essentially a challenger to him as the biggest Yankee on the team. When the 1927 season started, the newspapers used to carry all of the stats for what they called the Big Four, which was Babe Ruth, Tris Speaker, Rogers Hornsby, and Ty Cobb. But by the middle of the season, it had expanded to the Big Five and included Lou Gehrig, which is an awesome thing to have happen for a 24-year-old in his third season in the major leagues.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting what he was focusing on, because obviously coming from Columbia right to the bigs, he was focused on all the guys who had gone from college to the majors. There's a lot of great Ty Cobb stuff in there too, because their relationship was blown out of proportion in the media, but they actually had a good relationship, and Ty Cobb talked a lot of smack. What was it like learning about Ty Cobb in that context?
Well, one of the things that I really enjoyed was discovering the newspaper coverage of the fight that Lou Gehrig and Ty Cobb had after a game under the grandstand on the way to their clubhouse. And they got into a real knockdown, drag-out fight where Lou actually got knocked unconscious. Babe came in to help. In the process of towards the end of the fight, Ty Cobb was kicking at him with his spikes. So he was playing a little dirty at the time, according to, baseball etiquette, I guess. If you're going to have a fight, you don't kick with your spikes. But, finding that was pretty interesting. Lou didn't mention that, but that's just one of the things that I was able to put into the essay to complement Lou's story.
How much of this also was just humanizing him? Because, so much of him today is just ALS and Lou Gehrig's disease. And we know he was this all-time great player, but how much is this like, hey, I just want people to know who this guy was at the peak of his career?
Yeah, that was the whole thrust of what I wrote. I mean, everything that Lou wrote in his memoir is just straight from the heart. A wonderful guy, a guy you would like to have for a friend for the rest of your life. I tried to put it in perspective. He was not a perfect person. He liked to argue with umpires, got thrown out a number of games, but tried to put everything into perspective as far as relationships with his parents. In his memoir, he only mentioned his father once and said he was sick. But in the process of writing his memoir, he gushed effusively about his mother, called her his best pal, and she literally was.
He dealt with a lot of tragedy, and a lot of people were telling him not to pursue baseball. It's so different than it is today because obviously the pay scale and everything. But what was it like discovering that part of it where it's like, no, Lou, like go get a real job, like don't go play Major League Baseball?
Well, you mentioned his pay. His bonus was $1,500 to sign with the Yankees, which in today's dollars is less than 23,000.
Wow.
So if you could get a player like Babe Ruth today for $23,000, you'd take him in a heartbeat.
No doubt.
Even when Lou started, he was not a good fielder, and he was always a haphazard base runner at best. But man, he could hit. That was his strength.
And the other part that was interesting is just Wally Pipp, because obviously, it's become folklore at this point. Don't get Wally Pipp, but like Wally was willing to help Lou Gehrig become a better first baseman, and Lou gives him a lot of credit. So, what was most interesting about that relationship to you?
Well, yeah, I think that was typical of just about everybody that Lou met in his lifetime. Everyone liked the guy. I never really came across anybody he ever had a lasting feud with. And everyone was willing to help, no matter whether they were rookies like Lou himself or veterans that had been in the league for 15, maybe even 20 years. Everyone wanted to make him a better player and a better person.
When people read your book and understand what Lou Gehrig wrote and then the essay that you wrote, what are some things that'll surprise people about him, and what do you want them to learn about him?
One of the things is his close relationship with his mother. As I write about in my essay, when they would go to spring training, all the other players would look on it as like, ooh, like college players would be, it's spring break. We're going to have fun. His mom would go along and they'd walk along the beach instead of going out drinking and chasing women and so on. So that's one thing that definitely comes through stronger than probably anything else in his memoir and what I write as well.
And just comparing him to the Babe and the lifestyle that he was living, or DiMaggio and Mantle, like just a much different guy. Like you said, like he got into some of this stuff later on in his life, but much different in terms of the start of his career.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the things that definitely comes through doing the research is there were essentially two sections of the Yankee team. There was the section led by Babe Ruth, who wanted to drink and womanize and just have a good time. And then there was another group epitomized by Lou Gehrig, who liked to go for walks, watch movies. Earl Combs liked to sit in his hotel room and read the Bible at night. So there were two separate groups socially, but they all came together as a ball team.
And they were one of the best teams ever. Al, thanks so much for putting this together. I'm really excited for people to check it out. Be well, and we'll talk to you down the road, all right?
Oh, thank you, DJ. Appreciate the opportunity.